Hello. Today, writer and reader friends, we are going to be talking about my novel writing process, and I'm going to use a little bit of what I like to call alphabet math in a very unrevised short story to explain the process. And of course, we will have our channel shout out. So let's get started. Hi, my name is Angela. If you are new here, this channel is AKHarrell Writes. I'm AKHarrell. And if you are returning, thank you for coming back. So today I wanted to talk about what I do, or really what I did to plot my novel. And since this is, more of a writing channel than anything else, I wanted to share what I do with y'all. Maybe give you something to use or give me some advice. So I don't like to talk about stuff without having a kind of definition to it. And after going through a lot of books and channels and lectures, what I've come up with is a definition for what I believe plot means. Now, I am not a person that just loves math. No, ma'am. I am a person that utilizes math as necessary. Okay? As writers, we do have to use some kind of math. But for my novel, I decided that I would put a little math equation together, but I would make it alphabet math. So just letters, no numbers. Don't run. Don't get afraid. Okay. And the reason why I did that is because when I was in school, in college, the only math that I ever liked was algebra. And I think I liked it because it had letters in it at some point. Okay. So we're going to use what I call a little bit of alphabet math. And I've heard of some other authors stating that they've used math to put their stories together, but I didn't really connect with how they were doing it. And so as a writer, as we do, I adapted it and I used the concept of having a math equation, but put in my own, I guess you would call them integers, letters. Okay. This may not be your definition, but it is mine. Just take the recipe and adapt. Okay, that's what you do. Let's get to it. Alphabet math. So using that definition, I wanted to kind of try it out. That's what I like to do when I learn something that deals with the writing technique. And so what I did was I took a very short idea and made it into a very short story using what I feel is plot. And what I did was I used the first example as a way to show what plot isn't. It's not just a series of events. And then I used the second example to kind of show how I developed that first grain of an idea, which was example 1, into more of a story, which is example 2. Hold on, you'll see what I'm talking about in 1 minute. Mary went to the garden shed and grabbed the small amber bottle. After that, she went to the kitchen. She spoke to the cook, who poured her a glass of milk and gave her a plate of cookies. Mary took them and headed to her bedroom. She passed her husband's office and her children's rooms on the way. Once she got to her bedroom, she sat at her desk, wrote a letter, drank the milk, and ate the cookies. She picked up a Bible, read a passage, and yawned. Then stood, walked to her bed, unfolded a quilt, laid it across the bed, then lay down on her side, watching the moon. Her eyes closed. Then she died. It was Christmas Eve. So that was example number one. And as you can see, I was doing nothing, zero, zilch, nothing. All I said was that happened, that happened, that happened, that happened. My God, that is not a story. That is what you call a sequence of events. That's it. Let's get to a story. Okay? Yeah. Sample two.
Mary had always been a squeamish person. Even as a child, she never liked frogs, mice, bugs, or even the occasional garden snake. The older she grew, the more squeamish she became. Everyone thought it all rather humorous before the war. Even John, her husband, laughed giddily at Mary during a visit they'd taken to Martha's Vineyard in the summer of 1915 after she'd screamed bloody hell when a crab crawled near her hand. Beneath her dresser drawer, wrapped in a fragile lace handkerchief, was a tattered, yellowed newspaper clipping. It smelled of perfume and earth. The ink was smudged and the words barely visible. Yet Mary read them as if the newspaper had been newly delivered. The number of fatalities among the wounded in the Battle of Somme, July 16, 1916, a mere 6 months ago, are limited in number. Casualties were caused by German machine guns and faulty artillery barrages. Remember those brave souls lost in battle and be thankful we are winning the war. May God save the King.
Lies, all lies. Poor Richard, my poor Richard. I miss you dearly, my love, said Mary. She eyed the gun sitting above the fireplace mantel. The sudden taste of salt filling her mouth reminded her of the first night she'd cried for Richard, the first of many nights. Drying her face with the handkerchief, she rewrapped the article and placed it back inside the drawer. A gun? Too messy. A hanging? No, that wouldn't do either. The head might snap off. Still too messy. Poison? That could be simple, clean, efficient, and ladylike. Yes, poison. A sensible choice. A sensible choice indeed. Mary walked quietly to the garden shed. There must be something, she said. Her eyes drifted over each shelf before landing on a small, amber-colored glass bottle. Perfect. The scent of warm, sweet vanilla mixed with cinnamon and almond beckoned her toward the kitchen. The cook's head bobbed near the sash window. As she opened the heavy mahogany door to enter the room, she eyed a glass of milk and a plate of cookies sitting upon the large oak kitchen table. The cook dropped her eyes, then curtsied before speaking. Good evening, missus. I've just finished baking sugar cookies and sat out a glass of milk for St. Nick, as the children requested. May I get you something before you retire? No, Mrs. Bedlestone. On further thoughts, a few of your delectable morsels and a glass of milk is all I desire. Your sweets have always brought me great pleasure. And the children will believe the kind old gentleman actually exists if the plate is empty and the milk drank. Mrs. Bedlestone smiled. Yes, madam, that they shall. Thank you, madam. Mary sat in silence as Mrs. Bedlestone poured her a glass of milk and placed 3 cookies beside her. Good night, Mrs. Bedlestone. Good night, madam. Mary watched as Mrs. Bedlestone headed down the stairs leading to the servants' quarters. A most deceptive trail. Mary had visited the quarters only once before, having an urgent need to convey to Mrs. Bedlestone her grocery needs. Her husband had invited guests without warning, and despite the lack of notice, as a physician's wife, Mary did not want to appear ill-prepared. Normally, she would have rung Mrs. Bedlestone's bell. However, it had been out of commission. Mary had been surprised when the dank, dark stairs leading to the quarters
had suddenly brightened after reaching the landing where the servants gathered. Their relaxed looks, good cheer, and happiness toward each other was more than she could bear, reminding her of days long past. Picking up the milk and cookies, she headed up the long, winding marble staircase that would lead to her bedroom. As she walked, she passed her children's rooms and lingered, listening to see if they had fallen asleep. Gliding forward, she stopped at a set of intricately carved mahogany double doors, her husband's office. A light flickered beneath the door. She could tell by the constant scratch against paper it would be another late evening, another Christmas Eve.
Okay, now that was example 2. As you can see, I put a little bit more stuff into it. But what did I put into it? Well, we are going to find out exactly what my recipe was for putting that, little short bit of a story. And don't judge me. That was a story off the top of my head. No revision, nothing. But it had the bare bone basics of what I'm looking for. And that's what we're going to talk about next, because I use what I like to call my
news reporting plot structure. So in the world of newspapers and reporting, usually they will ask, some specific questions. You guys have seen this before. I like this format. I use the who, what, where, when, why, and how format. And so I thought to myself, since you like that so much, can you do it with plot? And I'm going to do it with plot. So the who. I need to know in the plot, who are the characters? And I have a star by that. And that just means that some things are unknown and or they may change once, you begin writing. So right now I know who my antagonist is. I know who my protagonist is. I know who some minor characters are, but I'm still writing. I don't know who can come up or who don't. I mean, I've had 2 characters come up that I never even knew were going to come up before the story started. Okay. Then we have the what. What is the story about? So, usually you have some type of idea, grain, something about it. Okay. The where. Where does it take place? I need to, get at least a clue what country I'm in, what continent I'm on, what state I'm, something, when, what time period is the story set? Because, there are a bunch of stories that are historical, which is what I like. There are some, fantasy stories that, you don't know what time period that is. There are some contemporary stories which are set in modern day time. You kind of want to give the reader, and you want to make sure that you give yourself, what time period you're in, especially for, like I said, like fantasy or historical, where you're going to probably be doing a lot of world building. And so, knowing what kind of time period you're in, especially if it's, like I said, historical, where you probably will do a lot of research, you kind of want to have at least some type of clue as to where you're going to be researching. Then why now? So that goes to the motivation piece as far as I'm concerned. Why are you writing this story? And why are you writing it now? Like, what has motivated you? Because that will probably get you through. Every time I, get down to trying to, get a little bit of a stall, or what some people may call a writer's block. Once you're into the story and maybe you start getting a little discouraged because you're not as far along as you want to, that motivation piece will keep you going. And I love to ask the why, and then the how. How are you going to write it? What are you going to use as your writing tools? I have a couple of books I use for my research. I have a couple of videos. I have my laptop. I have my recorder that I use when I'm talking about. I have my little notebook that I keep by my bed, and then I have the one that's in my purse. I have resources that help me with dates and pictures and all that kind of stuff. And so you want to have your writing tools together. This is thankfully not a profession where you need a whole bunch of money. Like, you just don't, right? So that's a blessing. And so I try to do the plot structure part and pretty much the rest of my story using these types of words. I even do it for scenes.
And as we do on this channel, it is now time for our channel shout out. Yay! Please support. Thanks. And just because I got a little carried away with the whole alphabet math, I put together a whole equation, a story writing equation, alphabet math style. Take a look.
So y'all see this? Now listen here, don't be getting excited, because we are writers and we ain't about that math, but we are going to be looking at these little integers, which I know are numbers, but whatever, letters. We're going to be looking at these in a upcoming video. So far we've covered the sequence of events and a little bit of the other stuff in the plot. I didn't really explain, but I put the cause and effect, and I put the character development a little bit into the example of the short story. So we're going to use that same short story, and we're going to go through the rest of the plot. I'll explain it a little bit more, and then we're going to go through and look at some of the other elements in a story. But as you can see, there's one element called the why, which is you, and that means that only you can tell that story. Boom.
And as always, thank you so much for joining me. If you like this type of content, come back, sit a spell, like, subscribe, share, do all the things. And go read some great books and do some happy writing. Bye.